My name is Caroline Whitmore. I'm 68 years old, a retired English teacher, and this old house has been my anchor ever since my husband passed away. I never thought the place I poured my life into would turn into a battlefield, but the truth revealed itself on a rain-soaked afternoon I'll never forget. The storm was loud enough to rattle the windows, and I had just set the kettle on when the doorbell cut through the sound. 3 sharp rings. When I opened the door, there she was, Sabrina, my brand new daughter-in-law, standing beneath a white umbrella, smiling as though she'd just won something. Behind her was a man in a wrinkled suit with a notary's case, and behind him, my son Daniel, drenched and silent. "Caroline?" she said sweetly, brushing past me before I could even answer. "We just need to finalize a few things with the house. I brought a notary so we can make it official today." The word house hit me like a crack of thunder. My house. The home where Daniel learned to walk, where I stayed up nights grading essays, where my husband's voice still seemed to echo in the hallways. Sabrina walked straight into the living room, laying out papers on the coffee table, with the authority of someone who thought ownership was already hers. I looked down at the top sheet, the words "Power of Attorney" jumping out at me, and I saw my name typed above a forged signature. My son stood behind her, avoiding my eyes. He didn't need to say a word, I understood everything. I smiled tight and deliberate, the kind you give a predator before you let it know you see its teeth. They thought I'd break down, beg, or blindly obey. They thought wrong. As the thunder rolled closer, I set the kettle back on the stove, letting the water boil slow and steady. I wasn't going to give them the reaction they wanted. Not tonight. This wasn't their ambush. It was the beginning of my war. The first time I saw the truth behind Sabrina's smile was not that rainy night, but a week earlier at their wedding. I had stood in the back of the reception hall in Jersey watching Daniel beam like a boy who thought love alone could build a future. Sabrina floated in white silk, glowing with that practiced radiance brides wear, and when she hugged me before the ceremony, she whispered, "You raised such a strong man." I promised to take care of him. I wanted to believe her. God help me, I did. The evening passed in a blur of champagne flutes and photographs. I smiled when the cameras pointed at me, lifted my glass for every toast, and clapped as they cut the cake. From the outside, it looked perfect. But there was a moment I remember it too clearly, when I caught Sabrina scanning the banquet hall. Not with joy, but with calculation, as though she were taking inventory of the life she had just stepped into. After the honeymoon, they came to my home for dinner. I thought it was a simple visit, a chance to settle in as newlyweds. Instead, Sabrina insisted on bringing her parents along. I served roast chicken and potatoes, poured wine, tried to make conversation. Yet her mother kept asking about square footage school districts' resale values. Her father wandered the rooms with his phone out, snapping photos like an appraiser. I kept my smile fixed, though my chest tightened. They weren't admiring my home, they were measuring it. The same walls where Daniel had grown up, the same staircase where he once slid down on a laundry basket, had become nothing more than assets in their eyes. That night, after the dishes were cleared, I lay awake staring at the ceiling fan, realizing something I didn't want to admit. They weren't visiting family, they were scouting property. The morning after that dinner, I was carrying a folded dish towel toward the laundry room when I heard voices drifting down the hallway. The guest room door was half closed, and Sabrina's tone floated through like perfume laced with poison. "So when do we unlock the house?" she whispered. There was a pause, a rustle of sheets. My heart thudded and I froze, holding my breath. "It's just sitting there," she continued, her voice low but eager. "Do you know what a place like this could sell for? We could flip it, maybe move into something more modern. How much longer is she really going to need all that space anyway?" I couldn't hear Daniel's reply. Maybe he didn't give one. Maybe his silence was his answer. I pressed my palm against the wall, the cotton towel clutched so tightly my knuckles ached. The word unlock echoed in my head like I was nothing more than a hinge in the way. All day I tried to dismiss it. I brewed coffee for her, asked about her manicure, even helped her find a phone charger. She leaned against me, called me Mom, smiled with her usual sweetness. I played along because I had already made a quiet decision. I would not warn them. I would not confront them. I would not let them see my hand too soon. That night, I poured my tea stronger than usual and sat by the window staring at the hydrangeas blooming unevenly along the fence. My late husband once told me, "Never ignore a whisper when it scratches at your bones." I felt the scratch now sharp and undeniable. They thought I was sentimental. They thought silence meant weakness. They were wrong. I wasn't preparing to surrender. I was preparing to watch. It was a Tuesday afternoon when I finally understood just how far Sabrina had taken her scheme. I was standing in the produce aisle of Whitman's Market debating whether I needed more butter when I heard a voice behind me. Aunt Caroline. I turned surprised. A young woman with too much bronzer and a swinging tote bag hurried toward me. It took me a moment to place her Marla Sabrina's cousin on her father's side. We'd only met once briefly at the rehearsal dinner. She hugged me like we were old friends. "Congratulations," she chirped. I blinked. "On what?" She laughed lightly. "On selling the house, of course. Sabrina said you got an amazing offer. Everyone's talking about how fast it all happened." My hand tightened around the shopping cart handle until my knuckles went white. "Excuse me." Marla tilted her head, confused by my silence. "Well, I just hope you're moving somewhere with an elevator this time. These old places are murder on the knees, right?" She winked, waved, and breezed off toward the deli counter as though she hadn't just detonated a bomb at my feet. I stood there, staring at the bins of pears and radishes, my ears buzzing. Sabrina wasn't just whispering plans in dark hallways. She was speaking as though the deal were already done, as if my signature, my consent, my very existence were nothing more than a technicality. I abandoned my cart, walked straight out into the parking lot, and sat in my car gripping the steering wheel. My hands trembled, not with fear, but with fury. That was the moment I stopped hoping this was a misunderstanding. If she wanted to play games with my home, then she was about to learn I had more than memories to defend. I had the law. I didn't drive home from the grocery store that day. Instead, I sat in the parking lot with the engine off the rain sliding down my windshield, and I made a call I should have made years earlier. Within an hour, I was sitting across from Janet Doyle, my old attorney, the same woman who had helped me settle my parents' estate decades ago. Janet still wore her reading glasses halfway down her nose, her hair pulled back in the same no-nonsense bun. She listened quietly as I told her what had been happening. Sabrina's whispers, the forged papers, Marla's careless congratulations in the produce aisle. Janet didn't flinch. She simply tapped the deed I had brought with me and said, "If they've presented a power of attorney that you never signed, that's fraud. Plain and simple." Her words steadied me, like a hand on my shoulder. We went to work. Together we updated my will, adding a clause that no transfer of the property could occur without court supervision. We checked every title and insurance document twice. By the time I left her office, my estate was armored with signature seals and language strong enough to hold off even the boldest of thieves. At Janet's suggestion, I drove straight to the bank and opened a safe deposit box in my name only. Into it, I placed the deed, my updated will, my insurance policies, and the birth certificates I had kept tucked away in an old cedar chest for years. As the heavy door clicked shut, I felt something inside me click too. They thought they were circling prey. What they didn't realize was that I had teeth of my own. Janet had given me the armor, but I knew armor wasn't enough. To fight back, I needed a weapon. That's when I called Reuben Hale. Reuben had once been sheriff of our county, the kind of man who saw more than he ever said. After retirement, he spent his time running a bait shop on the edge of town, a place that smelled of cedar shavings and lake water. I found him there, leaning on the counter, his fishing vest filled with pockets and secrets. "I need to know what they're planning," I told him. "Not rumors, not guesses, proof." He studied me for a long moment, then scribbled something on a yellow legal pad. "You want it quiet or traceable?" "Quiet," I said. "Very." A week later, Reuben handed me a small flash drive in the parking lot behind the old post office. No words, just a nod. That night, with the blinds closed and a mug of tea going cold beside me, I slid it into my laptop. Sabrina's voice filled the room, not the syrupy tone she used with me, but raw, unguarded. "She's so clueless," she laughed. "We'll flip that house the second she signs. Daniel's already looking at listings. I told him not to wait." There was muffled laughter in the background, then her voice again sharper this time. "She won't fight us. She thinks silence makes her safe. It just makes her easy." I sat perfectly still, letting the words settle like ice in my veins. Then I reached for my journal and wrote it down. June 11th, 7:32 p.m., audio evidence secured confirms. Intent to sell without consent. I underlined "flip that house" 3 times. They wanted silence. Instead, they had just given me a confession. 2 nights after I listened to that recording, Daniel showed up at my door alone. I saw him through the front window before he even knocked, standing there with his hands shoved into his pockets, like a boy about to confess to breaking a window. I opened the door, but didn't invite him in. "Hey, Mom," he said quietly, stepping past me anyway. He looked around the living room as if it no longer belonged to him, as if the place where he'd once built Lego castles and spilled orange juice was suddenly foreign. He cleared his throat. "Sabrina thinks it's time. You've got this big house and it's too much for you. We found a really nice condo in Newark, full staff medical access, even a pool. You'd love it." I let him finish watching the rehearsed words tumble out of his mouth. He was reciting, not speaking. Her script, not his. I smiled faintly. "And if I don't want to move?" He hesitated. Then, "Maybe we'll have to reevaluate things. It's hard for Sabrina to feel settled when this place is still in limbo." "In limbo," I repeated softly. The word tasted bitter. His eyes darted away. He didn't want to say it outright, but the threat was there. If I stayed, I'd lose him. Or maybe he thought I'd already lost him. I wanted to shake him to remind him who had carried him through pneumonia, who had worked double shifts after his father died just to keep these walls standing. But I didn't. I stayed calm. "I'm not leaving," I said flatly. He opened his mouth, closed it again, then finally whispered, "Why not?" "Because history isn't a burden," I told him. "It's earned." The silence between us was heavy, broken only by the storm pressing against the windows, and in that silence I realized my son was no longer standing with me, he was standing with her. The morning after Daniel's visit, I drove out to Hartford. The dogwoods were blooming pale pink along the sidewalks, their branches swaying like they knew secrets. I wasn't there for this scenery. I was there for Judge Edward Callahan, retired after 30 years on the bench, and once a close friend of my late husband. He greeted me on the porch of his brownstone, his cane resting against the doorframe. "Well, Caroline Whitmore," he said, his voice warm but sharp. "What storm brings you here?" We sat at his kitchen table with chipped mugs of black coffee, and I told him everything. Sabrina's forged papers, Daniel's silence, the recording that proved it all. I spoke carefully, my eyes fixed on his as though I were back in his courtroom. When I finished, he didn't sigh or shake his head. He simply said, "You've already done more than most would. Now let's make it permanent." Together, we drafted the framework, a living trust for the house locked tight beyond the reach of probate or contest, a separate trust for my savings hidden from anyone who thought they had a claim. And one more line, the one that mattered most, disinheritance for Daniel and Sabrina if they attempted any further interference. For the heir, I didn't hesitate. I named Emily, my sister's daughter, a school teacher in Oregon, who called me every month just to ask if I was sleeping well. She had no idea what she was about to inherit. Not just a house, but peace. As I signed my name across the final page, I felt lighter, steadier. Daniel and Sabrina thought they were circling prey, but I was building a fortress. They came back on a Thursday afternoon just as the lilacs in my yard were beginning to wilt. Sabrina stood on my porch in a fitted blazer. Her smile stretched too wide, Daniel behind her, with eyes fixed on the ground and the same weary notary clutching a clipboard. "We've got all the final documents ready," Sabrina announced, her voice syrupy and triumphant. "Figured it'd be easier to do this smoothly. No surprises." She even held up a new pen, as though this moment were some kind of celebration. But there was a surprise waiting. Behind me, standing quietly in the foyer, was Deputy Monroe from the county sheriff's office, his badge glinting under the hallway light. I opened the door just enough to step outside. I didn't invite them in. Instead, I handed Sabrina a thick envelope sealed and heavy. "This is for you," I said calmly. Her smile faltered. "What's this?" That I replied is a formal cease and desist signed by the court. Effective immediately, you are barred from any legal or financial action regarding this property. The notary froze. Daniel's head snapped up, his face pale. Sabrina blinked rapidly, flipping through the pages, her voice turning shrill. "This is a misunderstanding. We were trying to help." Deputy Monroe stepped forward, his tone firm but measured. "Ma'am, you've been served. Any further attempts will be reported to the district attorney as fraud." Daniel finally found his voice. "Mom, you called the cops on us." "No," I said evenly, my eyes on his. "I called the courts, and they answered." For a long moment, the only sound was the rustling of papers in Sabrina's trembling hands. The storm had shifted, and for once, I was the one holding the thunder. It didn't take long for the knock to come again. Barely 2 hours after the deputy left, I heard the pounding on my door, louder, more desperate. This time it was Daniel alone, his face drawn tight, his eyes red. "Mom, what is this?" he demanded, shoving the envelope back at me as though it were burning his hands. "What are you trying to prove?" I unlatched the chain and opened the door wide enough to let the truth through. In my hand was another envelope, cream-colored, embossed, notarized. I pulled out the first page slowly, my name signed at the top. His name nowhere to be found. "It proves," I said softly, "that you are no longer my beneficiary. Not you. Not Sabrina. Not anyone who sees me as a signature instead of a mother." He blinked, as if I'd struck him. "You don't mean this." "I do." His voice cracked. I was scared. Of debt, of responsibility, of not being enough. "And you thought dismantling my life would fix yours?" I asked, stepping closer. He swallowed hard, unable to meet my eyes. I wanted to hold him, to remember the boy who once clung to my hand at the bus stop, but all I saw was a man who had chosen greed over loyalty. "You inherit what you earn," I told him, "and what you've earned is absence." He stood there speechless, the paper trembling in his hands. From the sidewalk, Sabrina's voice cut through, sharp and furious. "She's bluffing Daniel. She won't go through with it." I turned toward her, my voice carrying down the street. "This house no longer belongs to me. It belongs to a preservation trust. No sales, no inheritance, no access, ever." Her face crumpled. Daniel's shoulders sagged, and for the first time, silence felt like victory. The next morning, the sky over New Haven was startlingly clear, as though the storm had finally wrung itself dry. I was sipping coffee at the kitchen table when I saw Daniel's car pull into the driveway again. He moved slowly this time, no anger in his steps, just exhaustion. When I opened the door, he didn't try to force his way in. He stood on the porch, shoulders slumped, his eyes rimmed with red. "She's gone," he said hoarsely. "Packed up, went to her sister's. Said I blew it. Said you were supposed to be the easy part." I stayed quiet, letting his words settle. "She loved the money more than me," he whispered, rubbing the back of his neck. "And I let her." I nodded once. "You let her." He finally looked up, guilt shadowing his face. "I'm sorry, Mom. I don't expect anything. I don't know who I am anymore." For a moment, I saw a flicker of the boy I raised, the boy who used to race his bike down this street until the porch light called him home. But flickers aren't enough to erase fire. "You're my son," I said gently. That will always be true. But respect isn't optional. If you want to become the man I know you could be, you'll have to do it without expecting reward. He nodded slowly, tears threatening, then turned back toward his car. He didn't ask for the house. He didn't even ask to come inside. He just left shoulders lower than when he arrived. That evening, I sat by the window, the hydrangeas swaying outside the deed now locked safely in trust. My niece Emily would inherit this place someday, but what she would really inherit was peace. Because love without respect is not love at all. It's a transaction waiting to expire. And mine finally had. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy these family drama and revenge stories, please subscribe and join me for more every day.